Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Movie Talk. This is the show where we talk everything films and the industry that surrounds them. I'm your host, Dag, and with me, as always, is Ben.
Welcome to the podcast, finally.
It's been a long time. Um, Obviously, to address it, as you guys will be asking questions, it's just been really hard for myself and Ben to get together to record this. It was a lot more difficult than I think we anticipated. Just because we are both so busy in our lives and things like that, making time to do a podcast, things like that. Like, I work a full-time job, Ben's in full-time education. It's difficult to get together to do this, but what we thought would be a good idea to kind of kick off the return here is Ben has attended over the last few weeks the London Film Festival, so we thought we'd do a bit of a rundown of the festival, where Ben can talk about all the films he saw and what he thought of them, and because obviously all these films are here early, so he can give you a good guide as to what to expect over the next few months. But before we jump into that, there are a couple of news pieces we do want to talk about. For one, kind of sticking on topic, Robert Eggers, who is the famous director of movies like The Witch and also The Lighthouse, which you saw at the London Film Festival. He actually announced today his next film, and it's got a lot of people excited, and that is The Northman. Now, this is like a Viking Norse movie, directed by Robert Eggers with a tremendous cast.
Yeah, so I will obviously talk about Lighthouse later in this episode, but so this is his third film. It's called The Northman, which I really like the title, by the way. Not sure about you. Do you like it?
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Title, and he was actually, I saw him in real life after The Lighthouse. He did a Q&A, and he talked about his next project, and he said it's going to be sort of in a similar vein. It's going to be still mythological, because if you've seen The Witch and then when you see The Lighthouse, they're both heavily mythological. So I think this is really in keeping, and I think it's really good. And I mean, dude, if you look at the cast, you've got Anya Taylor-Joy, who was so good in The Witch. Like, I freaking love her. You have Willem Dafoe, who was incredible in The Lighthouse. You got Bill Skarsgård, you got Alexander Skarsgård, and then you've got Nicole Kidman as well. Like, that's a really good cast. And also the premise is right up his streak. So I'm excited. You're excited, right?
Very excited indeed, yeah. It just seems like a really good idea for him to kind of move in. Again, sticking in that mythology kind of realm, I think is really, really smart for him. It clearly works for him. It clearly is a good thing for him to kind of continue to explore. And again, exploring like a new area of mythology. Like, it seems like this will be Norse mythology. Probably not Norse mythology to the sense where we're talking about gods and things like that, but probably just, a few other smaller, more mystical, supernatural kind of things. I think it's really awesome. And again, that cast is great. This guy is an amazing director. I can't wait to see The Lighthouse. It looks so fantastic. And Ben actually did offer me the chance to go see The Lighthouse, but unfortunately I wasn't able to make it because I live nowhere near London. So unfortunately I wasn't able to make it, but yeah, this honestly sounds like such a great idea, and I'm already super hyped for it already, even though it's just been announced today. Now, also some other news we got today is some casting news for Matt Reeves' upcoming The Batman film, of course, starring Robert Pattinson as Batman. And we've had a couple of castings recently. We got Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, and today we got Paul Dano as the Riddler. Now, I have to say, I'm just absolutely loving the direction Matt Reeves is taking this movie, just based on the casting. It's just so different and, kind of subversive to what you'd expect from like a big comic book movie like this. Getting someone like Robert Pattinson to play Batman and getting Zoe Kravitz to play Catwoman, and especially I am so excited to see Paul Dano play the Riddler. Paul Dano is such a brilliant actor, and he's never an option I considered. I never considered Paul Dano for the role, but when I think about him, he's just perfect. He absolutely I can just completely see him as the Riddler. If you've seen any of his movies that he's done, he's just always amazing. The performance that sticks out to me the most is Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners. He is just amazing in Prisoners, and to see him kind of just come over to the comic book movie world and to play the Riddler, I think it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm really digging this casting. When I saw it, I was like, of course. Like, why didn't I think of that?
It was literally just like a yes.
for sure. Like, if you've seen him in There Will Be Blood, I haven't seen Prisoners, but I've been meaning to. He's such a good actor, and I see him completely as the Riddler. As for Zoe Kravitz, you guys know I love Fantastic Beasts and the Crimes of Grindelwald. She was really good in it. But I haven't seen her in enough to convince me that she would be a great Catwoman, but I'm really open to it because I think it's interesting. And, like, I kind of dig it because I really did like her in Fantastic Beasts, but I just haven't seen her in enough. Like, I think she was in, what was it? Like, Divergent? Or
Yeah,
Allegiant
she was in one of them, yeah. I don't know
I
which
don't
one, but she was
remember
one
in
of
that,
them.
though. That's the thing.
I've only ever seen Insurgent out of that series, so...
Yeah, so I'm not so sure about her, but, like, I'm really open to it because I did like her in Fantastic Beasts, like I said. However, like, I love Catwoman, so it's going to be really hard to beat, especially Anne Hathaway for me, because I love her as Catwoman. And also I love the original Catwoman in the 1966 show and film. Like, those ones are, like, completely mine. Like, I freaking love them. And also Michelle Pfeiffer is so good in Batman 89. In Batman Returns. Oh yeah, it's going to be a high task to play Catwoman, but I have complete faith in this film. Like, Robert Pattinson is, like, the best Batman that I could think of, and I didn't think of it before. And just the way everything's going, like, I really dig the casting of Commissioner Gordon, Jeffrey Wright.
I do as well. I
like that guy. Like, he is so underrated. Like, even though a lot of people didn't like the Goldfinch, that guy can fucking act. Like, I love him.
I think that this casting, it's shaping up to be such an interesting and different cast. Like, Zoe Kravitz, like, again, I've not seen her in too much either. I saw her in Fantastic Beasts, and, well, I mean, I was completely different to you. I hated Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald. I really liked her in it. She was actually one of the things that stood out to me. I thought she was very good. She played Lita Lestrange, right? That was her character's name. And I thought she was very good, so to bring her over to this is really cool. My only thing with Catwoman that really just niggled me a little bit is that we found out who else was kind of, like, really close to getting the role. And I saw my dream casting for Catwoman, like, my personal fan casting nearly got it, which was Eiza Gonzalez.
I would have been so down for that.
Like, she's in Baby Driver. She's so good. I love Eiza, and she was literally my top cast. Like, if you said to me even before all this came out, who do you want to play Catwoman? It was Eiza. So to at least know that she was considered and screen tested makes me happy. I would have loved to have seen Eiza get the role, but I do love Zoe, and I think she's going to nail this. I really do. And I just think visually she has this look to her, like this striking look that, especially going up against Pattinson, I think they look, especially because Batman and Catwoman are a pair. They go together. So, like, to put them two next to each other on screen, I think would look awesome. So I'm here for it.
Who I wanted as Catwoman?
Yeah, go on.
I think there's a few good options that I would have picked. Right, I would have picked probably number one would be, like, either Emily Blunt. I think she would make a really good one, or Rachel Weisz. I know they're a little bit older, Rachel is, but, like, I don't think that matters too much. And also Rebecca Ferguson. Like, I think those are the ones I would have gone for.
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca Ferguson would have been cool. She's really good.
I think Emily Blunt would be my number one, actually.
Yeah, I love Emily. Why. Yeah, she would have been great. I really wanted Eiza, and when I saw her on the name list, I was so angry. Even though I love Zoe and I'm happy for her, and I think she's going to do great in this movie, just the fact that Eiza nearly got it. But anyway, really cool stuff, and it just makes me even more excited for the Batman, if I wasn't already. Now, the other kind of big news that we want to talk about is recent comments from famous director of The Irishman, which we will be talking about in this episode, Martin Scorsese, and his recent comments on the MCU and sort of comic book movies, superhero movies in general. So he's been getting a lot of stick over the last couple of weeks over his comments. And I think the reason why is because, he said some things a week ago, and some people kind of shrug it off, some people didn't like it, some people were alright with it. And then at the London Film Festival, I think it was, I don't know, were you here? Were you there?
I was there, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, you will have a better experience of it, so, But, yeah, he kind of just reaffirmed his stance. And a lot of people don't agree with it. And, I mean, you can get a better view on it, Ben, because obviously you were there directly. What was the like vibe of the room like when he said it?
Basically, right? So it was a press conference at the London Film Festival. Martin Scorsese was there, Robert De Niro was there, Al Pacino was there. It was the whole shebang, right? You know, the legends were there. And so everyone was eating it up. And before it started, I was talking to this guy who worked at the BFI. And I was like, we were talking to each other, talking about Scorsese. And somehow the topic of the Marvel stuff came up. And I was like, we were like, oh, he's totally going to say it, isn't it? He's gonna go full on into it. Said it. More like sort of a bit sniggling because we were like, yeah, that's right. You know, you said that. But I don't think anyone was against it, to be honest, because actually, like, a lot of his quotes have been taken out of context. So I agree with him of places from his recent comments, but at the same time, there's a few things I don't agree with. Got the statement here, so can I quickly read that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So I think this is the actual quote. So this is how it goes. It is the singular experience of experiencing a picture, ideally with an audience. So many others now, and so many other ways. There's going to be crossovers completely. The value of a film that's like a theme park film, for example, the Marvel type pictures, where the theaters become amusement parks, that's a different experience. I was saying earlier, it's not cinema, it's something else, whether you go for that or not. So I think personally, and you can say your opinion after, it's completely fine. Like, he talks about, you know, we have to keep and preserve, you know, the cinema experience. And what he's saying by him saying, you know, it's like a Marvel theme type picture, he's not actually saying he doesn't like them. Like, he doesn't watch them anymore. He tried it wasn't for him. That's like anything. That's like if you don't like horrors, you don't need to watch them, right? And that's what I get from him. He just doesn't enjoy the Marvel films. Same with like my dad. You know, he tried one, didn't like it, doesn't want to watch any of them. That's fine. Of what he's saying by cinema, I think people, if he said like it's not a movie or a film, that would be wrong. But by the way that most people use the term cinema, so talking about like proper films, because that's the wrong way to say it, but like serious films that are more traditional, sort of like Scorsese films, Coppola films, Hitchcock, stuff like that, basically. That's known as cinema. Like, if you're in a film class, you're not going to talk about Marvel films or like comic book films, or you're not going to talk about, you know, maybe the latest Fast and Furious films. You don't say that's cinema. You'll be like, that's a really good movie, or that's a really good film. And the term cinema, when you write about it, from what is meant by movie and film to most like film theorists and people that write about films, not like film critics, because they will use the term cinema in a different way. So says he studied film, he went to NYU and stuff. So by him saying cinema, it's not saying, oh, Marvel films aren't films, because yes, they are, obviously. So it's just he just doesn't want, you know, the cinema experience to be fully taken over by it, and that's understandable.
But what differentiates cinema from movies or film?
But that's what I was trying to say. Basically, obviously, cinema is like theaters, right? But it means a different thing. If you were to say Goodfellas, that is cinema, right? Because when you write about it in film theory and film analysis, not talking about online stuff, but like writing books and stuff, right? And when you're studying films, you say Jean-Luc Godard film is an example of pure cinema, or Hitchcock is pure cinema. So cinema is not the idea of a film, but it's the idea of something that's greater than film. Sort of, it's not to say that, say, you know, you say Fast and Furious, you wouldn't say that's cinema if you're talking about it in a film class. You'd be like, oh, that's a really good movie, or that's a bad movie. So it's a little bit different, but it's hard to differentiate.
my problem with his comments is, I mean, I get what you're saying. I don't really see a difference personally. I think that the way he's describing it, in the sense that, oh, you would say a film from someone like Hitchcock or Kurosawa is cinema, but something like a Marvel movie is not. That sounds very pretentious to me. I personally don't see why a film like an MCU movie would not be considered cinema, but just because something isn't full of visual effects and things like that, that is cinema. I think that the way he says that it's not cinema, I don't really feel like he's in a position to say. I know he's a masterclass director, and I'm not taking anything away from him as a director. He is a tremendous director, one of the best we have. But I don't really feel like it's up to him to decide what's cinema and what's not. Again, fair enough, if he doesn't like the movies, that's completely up to him. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but to kind of almost discredit them and write them off as if to say this isn't in the same league as other things, I think is a bit harsh on Scorsese's part. And it was particularly the comments where he said that these movies are invading. That I took real issue with. This is the thing that also, to link it back into somebody else, Jennifer Aniston recently had comments about this, saying the only movies that get released nowadays are comic book movies or Marvel movies. If you look at how many movies get released every year, there's probably only about 5, maybe 6 comic book movies a year. Whereas to give another comparison, if you look at how many comedy movies are released a year, that's got to be in the 30s or 40s. So why aren't you taking issue with that, but you're taking issue with comic book movies? Now, I understand that comic book movies are obviously so huge these days, they take up so much of the box office and they take up so much cinematic time. And Scorsese's comment about, saying how they take up so many screens and things like that, it lessens the amount of time that smaller films can get on into screens. I completely agree with that. But to say, like, we are being invaded by them, I just don't really feel like that's fair to say. And I think that, cinema always reflects what audiences want to see. And like it or not, audiences now want to see big comic book movies. That's just the way it is. And obviously film studios, who at the end of the day, this is a business, they want to make money. And I feel like that is what they're going to do. They're going to continue to push these kind of films because, again, that is what people will pay to see. So for me personally, while I understand where he's coming from, I understand his point of view, I just don't really agree with him on a fundamental level, and I feel like he is not really in a position to say what he's saying. But that's just me personally.
I'm actually, like, I really don't have a problem. Like, I'm the controversial one. I don't have a problem with what he's saying, but I can see if he said Marvel films are not proper films or movies, I would take issue with that. But because he's, he went to film school, he studied film, and, in film school, you don't use cinema in the same way as you say, oh, I'm going to the cinema or the theatres or whatever. I can understand that he's probably coming at it from a different angle. But I would take issue if he said something just a little bit different. And I get with the invading thing, like, it sounds kind of harsh. He was saying, yeah, superhero films are like maybe 6 in a year or something like that. But when they come, they are such a big event, and it's much harder, I think, is what is trying to get at, to make other films, because these big films are getting funded so massively. They are taking up a whole chunk of proportion, like, say, I don't know, The Farewell or Booksmart. When they came out, everyone was super hyped on them, but they only stay in for, like, I don't know, like 4 weeks or 5 weeks at max. Sort of what he's trying to get at, like, and the fact that fund The Irishman and then they had to go to Netflix, I think that's part of it. And
I think he's a little bit salty about the fact that he didn't get The Irishman in theaters. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's anything to do with comic movies. I think that's to do with the fact that he made the film 3.5 hours long, which, quite frankly, a lot of studios are not going to take, and also cinemas won't take it because that will limit the amount of screens they can show and the amount of money they can make. Again, I say this is a business. It's not show friends, it's show business, and I think that Scorsese needs to realize that. And again, obviously, he's a man of the times. He's someone who, he grew up in an age where the films that he makes and still continues to make now are very much of the time. And I feel like that, he almost needs to realize that things have changed, things have moved on. And he talks about preserving the cinematic experience and things like that. but he's the one who's made a movie for Netflix. I don't, he kind of confuses me. I feel like his comments are unjustified at times, and again, I think he's a tremendous director, and I have so much respect for him as a person. It's just these comments in particular, they just niggled me, because I feel like he's, again, not justified in what he's saying. Again, perfectly justified in his opinion, but in what he's saying as almost as fact, I don't think is very, very true.
Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of people, he's only been commenting on Marvel stuff, but a lot of people have been like, oh, but he was about to work on Joker. Doesn't really count because he's only mentioned Marvel. He hasn't talked about comic book films. He's just talked about Marvel. I'm pretty sure, like, every time he's referenced it, he's like, oh, these Marvel type pictures, right? So I wouldn't say something like Shazam is cinema, right? But it's obviously a film. Like, I love Shazam. With how you use the word cinema in a film studies type way, I would say there are films in the comic book genre that break sort of conventions and become, along the lines of what film theorists would call cinema. I would say possibly Wonder Woman's getting there. Definitely The Dark Knight. I think Logan's there. See where he's getting at from a film theory perspective, but not everyone has that perspective. So I think it's a little bit stupid of him to comment in this way. So I think his comments are stupid, right? Not everyone's going to understand, kind of the way he's coming from. But I kind of agree with it in a weird way.
I mean, this is the thing. I've never heard, until we've had this discussion right now, I've never heard of this differentiation between film and cinema. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's really strange, and it's very much to do if you've done film, and that's how you reference it. It's different.
Yeah, and I mean, everyone's taken these comments in different ways. Obviously, Scorsese will continue to do what he does. He's still a masterful director, and nothing will change that. But I just think it seems that we will never see him direct a Marvel movie anytime soon. So if you had any money betted on that one, you could take that away. Anyway, so let's move over to the London Film Festival now. I'll hand off to you. You can just rattle off and do this in any order you want. Just go through the films that you've seen, what you thought of them, and things like that. Just give little brief reviews about them, and yeah, we'll just dive into that.
So I saw 18 films at the London Film Festival, and I watched lots of them twice. I watched The Lighthouse twice, I watched Marriage Story twice, Portrait of a Lady on Fire twice, Jojo Rabbit twice, Knives Out twice. I rewatched quite a few of them, so over 20 watches basically. So I guess I'll go worst to best.
Sure.
Guys follow me, my worst by far is Uncut Gems.
I saw you didn't like this.
Horrific. I thought it was easily, in line with the worst film of the year, which is A Velvet Buzzsaw. I thought it was just an absolute mess on a stick. It was that bad that it was on a stick. It was not even just on like a human level sort of bad. It was just over the top bad. And so basically, right, so loads of people are loving this film. They're like, to create tension because there's all these people shouting back and forth, and the music's super loud. It's the most self-knowing music in the world, and it's supposed to be like Scorsese. It's supposed to be like these New Yorkers just shouting back and forth, abusing each other basically. Actually not tense at all. Like, I felt no tension at all. It's just taking a sort of New York archetype with them talking all the time, abusing each other, and all it comes off as is just a mess. It just comes off absolutely in a way that says, oh, we don't know what we're doing. We kind of want to do this Scorsese thing. You can shout back and forth. Adam Sandler can try and do a good performance, although he's still sort of like a sketch character where his teeth are just sticking out. He's sort of doing the same expression the whole time. It's one of the worst films I've seen in a long time, and the more I think about it, the more I dislike it. It tries to be tense. People have been like, oh, this is the most tense film I've seen this year, but it's actually because it's so hollow in the execution. It's not tense at all. It's just comes across as a just a weird, or just it's just all over the place basically. Like, I really hated it. Um, what's your impression?
Yeah, I saw your comments about it, and it actually surprised me because I heard there seems to be, and I've noticed this. I notice this every now and then with films. There's often a cultural difference between Americans and us Brits when it comes to
Yeah.
films, because this film debuted, I believe, at a festival not long ago.
Tiff.
Was it a TIFF? And people at TIFF, I came out and I think generally were very positive on it. And then I saw reactions coming out of the London Film Festival, and I'd say that generally the responses were pretty negative. So it's interesting. I've noticed this a few times with different movies, that sometimes just the cultural thing just doesn't quite work. For me personally, I think that I saw the trailer for this recently and I quite liked it. But I feel like that this film, obviously this is directed by the Safdie brothers who did Good Time. Have you seen Good Time?
No,
Um,
no, I don't really want to.
well, I've heard only great things about Good Time. I've not seen it
Same.
myself. It's on Netflix. I have it on my list. And I want to watch it as well, just for because I'm currently on a Pattinson binge. But I feel like that this film, obviously being directed by the Safdie brothers, I think it had a lot I had a lot riding on it, like in the sense that people love Good Time, and people were going into this with the same kind of expectations. So maybe it was destined to kind of underwhelm or completely just be shit, in your opinion. But yeah, I'm still interested to see it. I'll definitely check it out when it comes out, if it gets shown anywhere around here.
Yeah, the thing for me was, right, so I was actually kind of like, it was a surprise film, right? So we had no idea what it was. They said it was Cats, and I was like, fuck yeah, it's Cats. I want to watch Cats, and I wish I watched Cats instead of it. But I like the trailer for Uncut Gems, that's the thing.
Yeah,
And expectations, but they weren't very high because I wasn't super into the trailer. I just kind of liked it. And disappointing, like, it was really bad.
wow.
Anyway, that's my rant. Okay, next film. Let's talk about The Aeronauts. So, from Tom Harper, who directed Wild Rose. Do you see Wild Rose?
I did see Wild Rose, yeah.
And this is it's sort of really strong on the performances. Eddie Redmayne and Felicity Jones are really good. They're really great. Tom Harper does a very good job with the direction. It's a very nice looking film, some great CGI, and it really gets into you because there's real scenes that they filmed in the sky on an air balloon that are freaking terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying at points. It really gets under your skin. However, the only problem with the film is it's stretched out. It's not a very long film, but its story is trying to stretch out too long, and there's these flashbacks, and the flashbacks just seems like they're trying to add in some extra content. So it's a bit like half-half, like it's really good at points, and then it's like, I don't know about, the whole thing as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually got a screening for this coming up, and I don't know, it hasn't particularly grabbed me. I don't know if it's just because I'm not the biggest fan of either Eddie Redmayne or Felicity Jones. I'm not saying they're bad actors. I don't like, just as actors, I don't find them particularly attractive. But the story's cool, and this screening I've actually got is showing it in IMAX, and I've heard that this movie is I've heard it's very, very much suited to IMAX, so I'm definitely excited to see it for that aspect. I just don't know if the story or the characters will particularly grab me. Again, I'm not particularly too positive going in, but maybe it'll surprise me. Who knows?
Yeah, I definitely recommend watching it, like especially for the when they're in the air. It's great. Okay, so The King, the new Timothée Chalamet film. I'm a massive fan of Timmy.
I'm excited about this.
I freaking love him. Like Call Me by Your Name, Lady Bird, Beautiful Boy. They were some of my favorite films of the years they came out. Right, so I'm a massive fan of him. Starts, and The King in the first 10 minutes is really bad. Like it's so bad. There's what's the guy from Game of Thrones? He's in 1917, the new film.
Oh,
What's his face? Oh yeah, I remember. It's Dean Charles Chaplin, right? So he was in Game of Thrones. He played Tomlin or Tommy, whatever.
Yeah,
You
he
know,
was
one of
in.
the
I think
sons
he was
of
in Blinded by the
Cersei.
Light this year as well.
Yeah, okay. So he's in this, right? And he plays Timothy Chalamet's brother. And the first 10 minutes, Timothy is barely in it, right? And in the first 10 minutes as well, both of those two die. I don't care if I'm spoiling that because like, they are so bad. Possibly the worst performance of the year is Dean Charles Chaplin. He's in like the first 10 minutes. He gives this pantomime like performance. He's like shouting, and I'm just sort of rolling my eyes laughing, and everyone in the cinema was laughing because it was so bad. And then it moves on past when Ben Mendelsohn, who is terrible in this, by the way, and I kind of like Ben Mendelsohn in other stuff. Um, it fully gets really good, and I was super into it by the end. Timothy Chalamet and Joel Edgerton absolutely kill it once these guys are gone and once they're in full focus. And it's really riveting. The action scenes are absolutely brilliant. It's really well directed. It was just that first 10 minutes that weighs it down because I really didn't like it. And then it got really good. So I'm kind of split on that as well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it
Yeah.
gets good because I'm actually really looking forward to The King. It just looks like a film that I would really enjoy, and what I'm most excited about is Timothy Chalamet because I really like Timothy Chalamet. He's a really good actor, but personally, I've not seen too much range from him. And when I say range, I don't mean range as in range of acting ability. I mean range in terms of roles. He hasn't done much besides being a mopey teenager in movies, and he's great at that. But I want to see something like this, like The King, where he's playing a completely different kind of role. And I'm hoping in Denis Villeneuve's Dune he does that as well. So for me, I'm really excited to see what Timothy does with this. And also, obviously, Joel Edgerton, he wrote this as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's really heavily involved here. And Joel Edgerton is fantastic and everything as well, so bringing him in. How's Pattinson in this?
He's only in it for a bit towards the end of the film, but he's very funny in his scenes.
Cool. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, and this is also a Netflix movie, so that's pretty cool. I probably won't be able to see this in cinemas, but hopefully I might be able to if I find the chance. We'll see.
Anyway, all right. So The King is third to bottom on my list. All of them, I'll go over the big ones, right, that you guys will know about. So I watched A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I know nothing about Mr. Rogers, right? It's because that's an American thing. We really don't know anything about him unless you've watched a documentary here in the UK. So I didn't know anything apart from, he was a nice guy. He was a children's presenter. He sort of inspired hope to people. That's all I knew. And so Tom Hanks plays him in this film. This is directed by Marielle Heller, who did Can You Ever Forgive Me, which I still haven't seen. It just really didn't appeal to me. I just don't like Melissa McCarthy, although everyone was like, "Oh, she's so good." Yeah, I've been meaning to watch it. I'm trying.
I've seen it. It's good. It's pretty good. That's what I say.
I'll try and watch it.
It's pretty
but
good.
Anyway, so A Beautiful Day when it's with Tom Hanks, but Tom Hanks is actually a supporting actor in this film. Like his role obviously influences the whole film, but he's actually on screen, I would say, like third of the time, maybe about a third of the time. And whenever he's there, the film, he's so good. Like, I'm totally rooting for him to get a nomination this year for Best Supporting Actor. He's really good. He's so fragile, and it's such an inwards performance. I was really impressed by him. But then whole other part of the film, it's basically about this journalist and his struggles, and Mr. Rogers eventually helps him. That's all great when they're together, but apart from that, it's really conventional, really stereotypical. The writing is really, really sloppy. Basically, all the lines in the book, you could probably guess all the lines that are going to come out of their mouths. It's it's just very archetypal, very, very conventional. Nothing special at all. And I thought this was supposed to be really good. This was like an Oscar film. But then when you get to the Tom Hanks bit, it seems like all the focus in the writing and all the focus in everything else, and they've just slap together the rest of it, and it's not very good in those bits. The end of the film, I was like, I'm liking this ending. Like, it's sort of all coming together once Mr. Rogers comes back with the journalist from Esquire. I was like, I'm really liking this. But then when you look back at it, you're like, no, those bits between, it was just so weird how great the Tom Hanks stuff was and how really not very good the other stuff was. So this is another film that I'm split on, and I don't know why she directed this. Like, I'm not sure. Like, she's supposed to, everyone was like, oh, she's going to get nominated last year. She's really good. About this script should have called to her. Like, apart from maybe she loves Mr. Rogers, that's probably the main thing. But, like, it was just so conventional that I'm like, a person who was about to get nominated for an Oscar probably for directing, and her film was in contention, use a script that's like sort of first draft level. And it was just, it's kind of weird. I can't wrap my head around it, why they didn't like revise the script and be like, this is really conventional and kind of boring in between, and then it's really good at these points. Yeah, I'm just a bit confused by, how good some parts were and then how boring and not very good the other parts were. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much anticipation for this, just because the trailer didn't particularly grab me, and again, as you mentioned, Mr. Rogers isn't a thing that exists really in the UK, so I have no connection to him as a person or as a TV personality or anything like that. So, I don't know. I haven't really heard much reaction other than yours, so I don't know how other people, like, have you spoken to other people from the festival and how they were feeling about it?
Oh, A Beautiful Day.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of people that have been loving it, right? Some people like myself that were like, that's just, it's like good when Tom Hanks is there, but apart from that's not, all too good. So it's kind of split, like people love it or people were like sort of half on it. No one hates it straight up.
Well, that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, I'll definitely see it for sure.
I think if it's going to get nominated for anything, it will be Tom Hanks. He deserves it. And I think it would be a shame if anything else got nominated, really. Okay, so next film. It's known, but I thought I would mention it. Earthquake Bird, which is the new Alicia Vikander film, which I really liked. Now we're getting into the films that I really liked. This is by Wash Westmoreland, who did Colette last year with Keira Knightley. You saw it. You didn't like that film, did you?
Colette.
I loved Colette. I watched that last year at the festival. So I was like, okay, he's back again. I loved seeing him. He was on stage last year. Keira Knightley came out. And I just really loved the atmosphere there. And he came out again this year. I was like, hell yeah. I turned to my left, and freaking Alicia Vikander's next to me. I'm like, holy shit, it's Alicia Vikander.
Sat next to you?
So I was sat kind of near the edge, and there's this walkway where the actors and directors come out. And they were all standing there, and I was like, oh shit, Alicia Vikander's right next to me. Which was really cool. But anyway, talking about the film, it's set in Japan, and Rickon speaks Japanese like the whole way, which is absolutely nuts. And she's like full on into this. Like, she learned Japanese for this freaking film, and
wow.
There is no way that I would have hesitated in saying, oh, she doesn't know Japanese, she just learned this for the role. She seemed completely fluent. I was just blown away by that. And also the concept of the film's really interesting. It's sort of like a noir type film, and it's set in Japan. You've got this relationship, and then it starts to sort of twist in this weird way, and then you have the introduction of Riley Keough, who I'm a freaking massive fan of. Like, I love Riley Keough. And then it comes together, and it's just a really well done film. Like, the direction is so good. It's such a nice film to just and admire. It's just such a well put together film, and the performances are so good, and it's really subtle, which I really liked. So yeah, really recommend Earthquake Bird. That's coming out on Netflix, and I think it'll be in some cinemas around London, New York, and LA as well.
So I won't be seeing it in cinemas then. I mean, I don't really know anything about it. The only thing I knew about it was that Alicia Vikander was in it. So yeah, I don't know much about the movie.
Yeah, I highly recommend to watch it when it comes out on Netflix if you don't live in any of the big cities.
Yeah, well, if it's on Netflix, then obviously it's nice and easy.
Yes, and so the next film, The Two Popes, which you may have heard of from, it played at TIFF, and it got really good reviews. I thought it was really good. Anthony Hopkins and Jonathan Pryce, I always forget his name. They are so good. Like, this film shouldn't work. It's just like the story of two popes, and that's it. And it's sort of like the scandal of the Catholic Church. Not a very interesting thing. Interesting. This film is really good. It's directed by Fernando Meirelles, who did City of God. And City of God got nominated for like a shit ton of Oscars in like 2003 or 4. I forgot when it was nominated, when it was around. But I love City of God. It's sort of a gangster film set in Brazil. I love how this film, The Two Popes, the new Pope who's from Argentina, Jonathan Pryce freaking speaks Spanish the whole time, which is mad. Anthony Hopkins, they're talking Latin, and yeah, so it's really impressive on an actor's level, but also it's really well directed. You could have sworn you were watching a documentary. It's not necessarily shot in a documentary type way, but it's shot in a very City of God like way. If you watch the film, sort of some zooms and just the camera moving a little bit, some unconventional angles, and man, this film is so well edited and also written. This is like, I would say, like, it's like the perfect combination of writing, directing, editing, and acting. It's like, just really good, really solid.
Yeah, I do like the look of this. I have to say Anthony Hopkins is brilliant casting. But I think that this film does look, again, not a particularly interesting topic, but something that could be interesting if done well. And if it is done well, like you say, I think this could be a very, very good movie. So I'm definitely excited for this one for sure.
And then moving on, so we got Waves. This is obviously getting a lot of hype right now, and I very much so liked it. Once it gets to its third act, it should have ended by then. I don't normally I don't have a problem with films being long. Like, I freaking love some of the longest films. Like, actually, I'm not going to spoil one of them, but like The Wolf of Wall Street, westerns like Once Upon a Time in the West, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, all the films that are long. I don't care about runtime as long as it's a good film. But for Waves, the back half of the film, completely unnecessary, and it sort of changes. The main character isn't there anymore. But it does have its same morals, and the way it's shot sort of changes a little bit, but it still is a bit disappointing at the end because of how good the first part of the film is. Like, the first part of the film is all about this kid and his relationship, and it's very much so in the tone of, say, is like a mix between Moonlight and, like, I don't know, Lady Bird, more Call Me by Your Name, I would say. But then it gets really real, and it's like full on, like, proper arguments, and it gets super fucking real, and it's really, really good, and it's like incredibly shot and directed. There is this use of this 360 camera, which goes round and round and round in this car, and they do it a couple of times, and it's absolutely incredible. And it's just like, what a well-directed film. It's incredibly directed. It lets it down as its third act because it just goes on for too long. The story doesn't warrant it. I think the whole moral of the thing is about remorse and forgiveness. Could have capped that off end of the arc of the main character. Thoughts on it?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about this. It's funny how you mentioned Moonlight, because when I saw the first kind of marketing for the movie in the trailer, I got very Moonlight vibes from it. That's kind of what I compared it to. And Moonlight is a movie I really like. So if you're saying it's kind of in comparison to that, I definitely think that's obviously going to play well for me. Is this A24?
Yeah, it is A24.
Yeah, so same studio. So yeah, it's quite it looks very very good. I like what everyone's saying about it, so I'm sure I'll enjoy this. Do you know when this is coming out in the UK?
Well, I think it's like January or something.
Yeah, so yeah, not too long.
Yes, and to the next film, let's talk about Harriet, the new Cynthia Erivo film.
I'm excited about this.
Um, I know you love Cynthia
I
Erivo.
love Cynthia.
Same, so do I. So obviously last year she had such a great year. Bad Times was one of my favorite films. Same with you.
Yeah,
Widows, I freaking love Widows. She was great in Widows. And now she's back with Harriet, and man, what a film. I love this film. It's about the story of Harriet, who eventually names herself Harriet, and she escapes slavery, and she comes back across the country defying awards, and she saves slaves. Basically she rescues slaves, and it's incredibly realistic and incredibly real. You feel for everything. It's such a well acted film. There's so many characters who are in the ensemble because it's about slavery, and there is so many people in the plantation plants, and so everyone's firing off. Cynthia Erivo is incredible. This film is really touching. It made me cry at some points. Music, it's so well directed. It's just like a really, really it's just the perfect example of like a film that works really well. Sort of similar to, say, The Two Popes, I would say, but obviously very different. It's very inspirational, and it's a great watch.
yeah, I'm definitely excited just for Cynthia alone. She was like one of the standout actresses from 2018 for me. Kind of like a breakout star. Especially like in Bad Times, she's amazing in that film, and Widow, she's very very good as well. So I was I'm always open to hearing what she's going to be doing next. So and especially with a story like this, I think this lends really well to her. So I'm definitely excited for this for sure.
Yeah. And so moving on, so we got The Lodge, which you may have heard of. It came from Sundance, and I've been anticipating this for so long, since Sundance. So this stars Riley Keough, who I talked about, who was in Earthquake Bird. I'm a massive Riley Keough fan. I think she's so underrated. She was in Under the Silver Lake. She was in The House That Jack Built. She's been in some of my favorite films like every year, and I'm just, every time I see her, I'm like, the best, because she is so good. So same thing goes with this. She is so good in The Lodge. The Lodge, and because I was extremely tired, so I feel like I missed some of the points. It's really affecting, very shocking at points, and I love the tone of it. It's very Hereditary, but more so less horror and more psychological, getting to the lines of Midsummer in terms of, not in terms of what you see, but in terms of the atmosphere that's created. It's very, very sort of atmospheric, and it's really impressive. So well directed. Like some of the shots they put together and they visualize symbolic, and just like you feel like you're trapped in this place, and it's really, really good. Riley Keough is amazing. The kids are really good. Jaden Martell from It is in it, and it is just so fascinating, and how everything's put together and how sort of unnerving it is. Man, there's a few scenes that you will not forget if you watch this. It's really good, but I definitely need to watch it again because it's so. What do you think about
The Lodge is one I'm
that?
actually a bit more unfamiliar with. Actually, yeah, it's not one I've heard too much about. So, yeah, I don't really have much to say on that one.
Okay, I'll look into it. All right. So we've got Ford versus Ferrari, aka Le Mans 66. So I have no interest in racing or anything. I don't care about motor racing, but this film for me, like I thought going into it, I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna like this because it's Matt Damon, Christian Bale. You got a very good director in James Mangold. Oh, I really like that. And at the start, I didn't care about any of the racing, but once you get to the last two racing scenes, you're like properly into it. It's riveting, it's fully engrossing, but that's because of the characters, and the characters work so well. They're given so much time, and especially Christian Bale, man, he freaking kills it in this role. He is amazing in this role. He is hilarious. It's a really funny film, but also it's very riveting once you get to the end. And yeah, it's just overall a very good film, and it surpassed my expectations.
I have to say, I think Ford v Ferrari is one of my most anticipated films of the year. I am a fan of racing. I'm not super knowledgeable on racing, but I'm a big fan of car culture and things like that. Not particularly, racing in particular, or I'm aware of the Le Mans race, but I don't know much about it. But this movie, I just, obviously, Matt Damon, Christian Bale, two absolute powerhouses there. And then you've also got James Mangold directing, who I absolutely love, whether you're looking at The Wolverine, of course, Logan. I think Logan is one of the best comic book movies ever made. Or even like Walk the Line. He's a really talented director. And again, taking all those elements and chucking it into a racing movie, I think that's it's a perfect combination for me. I've loved the trailers. I've loved everything I've heard about it. This movie just looks like it's one of those films that's just perfect for me. And I am really excited to see this, especially in IMAX. I can't wait to see this in IMAX.
Yeah, I recommend it. It's very good. Okay, so moving on to like my top films of the festival. We've got Knives Out. Good as my top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's my number 6. I really, really love Knives Out though. Like, I think the trailers, they totally misadvertise it because it's not. It obviously has the ensemble. They play a big role, but man, it's Ana de Armas' film. Like, she's full on in charge of this film, and she freaking kills it once again. Like, she is so good. I came out being like, holy shit, this is her film, and I just wasn't expecting that. And just talking about the film overall, like, there's some amazing performances. Everyone's very good, especially Daniel Craig. Chris Evans is amazing, and obviously Ana de Armas. And then there's a few other performances like Don Johnson. He's hilarious in this. But I was really impressed. Ryan Johnson, like, I'm a massive Ryan Johnson fan. Like, I love Brick, and I love The Last Jedi. I haven't seen Looper. I kills it with Knives Out. I loved how precise it is. There's a lot of because it's a murder mystery. There's a lot of going back and forth between what potentially could have happened and what happened, and it's so stylized in a way that it's just so good. Like, it's the perfect combination of, style and mystery, and how he puts it all together. Great. It has such a great sense of humor. It's absolutely so funny. Like, it's super tight. The best thing about the film is actually the direction and the script. Obviously, I'm excluding Ana de Armas because I've already praised her already, but the script is super tight. If it's going to get nominated for anything, it's going to be for its screenplay, because it's so intricate. And I watched it twice. Coming back the second time, I loved it even more. Like, the first time I was like, oh, that's really good. That was really funny. Appreciated it even more. And so it's incredibly sharp, and just it's done in a way that is so pristine, and it's just really good. I highly recommend it.
Knives Out is another one of my most anticipated of the year. I remember we've been reporting on this movie ever since we started this podcast. Like, we were talking about all the different amazing castings we were getting here. Yeah, I mean, the cast is insane of this movie. And I'm really happy to hear that Ana de Armas really makes an impression here, because I love Ana de Armas. I absolutely love her. She was another one of my top casting choices for Catwoman, actually. But obviously, my favourite film of all time is Blade Runner 2049, and she is wonderful in that film. And I think she's wonderful in everything. The movie War Dogs that she did with Todd Phillips, I think she's very good in that. So to hear that she's, the star of this, basically, I don't have any complaints with that. And then she's going to be surrounded by so many incredible supporting actors and actresses like Chris Evans, Daniel Craig, obviously, why can't I remember her name from Hereditary? Toni Collette. Yeah, there's just so many great talents in here. So yeah, I'm very, very excited to see this.
Yeah, Okay, so let's move on. So number five on my list, we have Jojo Rabbit. Like now we're talking about the films that are like my top. Like my top four are like basically all the same in ranking, so it doesn't matter about my ranking. Um, man, I was super anticipated for this. Like I was super hyped. This film kills it. It's so good. I loved it. I watched it twice. It's absolutely infectious. It's wonderful. It's hilarious. It's touching. It does such a good job directing. It's really stylized, and I think the screenplay is incredible, and the performances. Griffiths, I think his name is. He plays the young kid. Dude freaking kills it. Thomasin McKenzie kills it. Taika absolutely steals the show with Hitler. He's Jojo's imaginary friend, and fourth that makes the film. It's absolutely perfect in all aspects, and I laughed so goddamn hard. It's the funniest film I've seen this year, and Taika just really kills it with this. It's really hard to explain. It's a experience that you have to experience, and seeing it in a massive crowd at the London Film Festival was just the best thing. Like Taika was there, Thomasin was there, the whole cast was there. It was the best thing seeing it with all of them, and yeah, I was just blown away by this, and I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, I mean, Jojo Rabbit is something that obviously I think a lot of people have been looking forward to. Taika, this is his next film. I love Taika. I've not seen absolutely everything he's done. Like the only movie I think from him I've not seen is What We Do in the Shadows. But I love everything else, and I'm really looking forward to this. Just the concept of it, I think, is brilliant. I love the cast. The fact that Stephen Merchant's in this will make me watch it alone.
Oh my freaking god, he is so good in the scenes he's in. I forgot about him.
Yeah, I've heard he's not in the movie too much, but I will watch anything that he's in. So
he drops some massive lines that everyone just burst into absolute tears over.
Glad to hear it. That's what I know.
Dude freaking kills it.
I love Stephen Merchant. So yeah, very glad to hear that. I'm very excited about Jojo Rabbit.
So Sam Rockwell, that has to be mentioned.
Oh,
so
I love
good.
Sam Rockwell.
All right, moving on. So my next film after Jojo, and these are all very similar in the ranking. These are all sort of the same. Is Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which I watched actually, funnily, at the Zurich Film Festival, but I accidentally watched it with German subtitles, which, oh shit, when I first went in, I was like, oh crap, I'm not going to understand anything, but I watched it with German subtitles, and because I learnt German and I'm part German, a lot more than I thought. And then, so I really enjoyed it the first time, and then watching it for the second time at the London Film Festival, subtitles this time, I was just able to understand more of the nuance, but I got basically everything. I knew the story because obviously I've seen it before, and I understood for the most part. But this time round, I was just absolutely enthralled. Like, this is one of the best films of the year by far. Really obsessed with this. If I want to make a film like any of these films, I want to make a film like this. Like, this is something that really just inspires me as someone who does film, who makes films and stuff. Like, this is... And so, basically, how I would describe it, it may sound a bit weird, but I would describe it with one word. It's nonchalant. So, like, it's just tasty. It's just elegant. It's the perfect example of how to do a romance. And I know, people may take issue with this comparison, but I'm not comparing it because it's an LGBT film. It's because it's about a gay romance. I'm not comparing it because of that, but I'm comparing it because of the intimacy felt in this film. And nothing apart from this other film, Call Me By Your Name, so intimate, and the screen, the way they portray this romance is the most intimate thing I've ever seen. And I was just absolutely captivated and just lost in this world between these two women and their love story. And it's one of the best love stories I've seen in my life. And number one, it's shot so goddamn well. It's absolutely one of the best looking films this year and of the past few years. It's sublime and it's visually, and I think that's the main thing: the intimacy and how much passion just oozes from the screen, comes off into you. You just can't help but be in absolute awe of this because the performances, like, you have no way of questioning this is real, right? And so because of the direction and how sort of passive it is and how it's sort of observational, there's a lot of whispering and you don't notice that, but that is sort of part of the intimacy. It's just really an overloading film, and you walk out and you're like, I want to make a film like this. It's so good, and it does make you speechless.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about this as well. I've seen a lot of people talking about the cast in particular are really stunning in this movie, so I definitely will check this out for sure as well.
Man, I can't talk about it enough. I freaking loved it so much, and the cast and the director came out. They did a really good Q&A, and can't wait to watch this again. Like, I'm so seeing this again. Okay, so my next one, which is, like I said, JoJo, Portrait, and these is basically all the same. Like, I freaking love them. They are 5 stars by far. I would say Knife Out, I put that at a 4.5. And then all the rest, like Ford versus Ferrari, Harriet, The Lodge, Waves, The Two Popes, Earthquake Bird, they were all 4 stars. JoJo, Portrait, and this next one are 5 stars. This is Marriage Story, the new film from Noah Baumbach with, and also Adam Driver. Also Ray Liotta's in it. Also Laura Dern's in it. The cast goes on. So goddamn good. It's absolutely one of the most realistic films I've ever seen. It's so nasty at points, but it's so loving at points, so intimate, and goddamn, Adam Driver freaking kills it. There's this one scene where I'm like, he has this breakdown, and I'm like, holy shit. I was just lost in it. You get absolutely lost in this because it's a strange mix of melodrama with romance with comedy. It's hilarious. It's so, it's finely tuned, you know, with all those different aspects of it. It's really kind of bittersweet, I would describe it as. And so it's hilarious while having that heart wrench. And there's these scenes where they break down, and, you know, Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson are like on full cannon. Like, looking back after I've seen this film and JoJo, because Scarlett was in it. Also, I saw the reports at Zurich with Adam Driver. So I've seen loads of films by them recently. I look back at it and I'm like, damn, Scarlett, a freaking good actor. Yeah. Like, I'm not a big fan of her as, like, I like her as Black Widow. I'm like, damn, great. She's so good.
Scarlett Johansson is a fantastic actress.
And I think she's really underutilized in the Marvel films, personally. But seeing these films, just like how good she is. Adam Driver, like, this guy is in every film, and he's so fucking good. Like, Black Klansman, Silence, obviously Star Wars. You know, the list goes on. This guy is in freaking everything. He's so good. And this is his best role yet. And this is Scarlett Johansson's best role yet. And so they are the perfect parents. And I love the way that this film is titled Marriage Story, when obviously it's about a divorce, but it's about the story. It's about, you know, the breakup between these two people and how their world sort of broke apart. But then at the same time, you want them to be together, but then things get so nasty between the lawyers. That's when Ray Liotta and Laura Dern come in. They kill it. And I just love how it switches from, oh, it's so loving, like, just the way it's presented. But then it switches to this nasty angle where they are full on going for each other's guts, that you're like, oh, shit. You're just so, I don't know, you're lost in the world, basically. So it's absolutely endearing. It's shot so well by Robbie Ryan, the cinematographer from The Favourite films. It's one of the best edited films. There's some cuts here where you're like, oh, shit. That is really good. And Noah Baumbach, he kills it. This is easily one of the best films this year. It's full of melancholy. It's beautiful, but also it's so nasty at the same time. And Adam Driver, man, like the best actor race this year. Like you got Leo, you got Adam, you got Robert De Niro, Joaquin. Dude, this is gonna be hard, but like Adam freaking kills it. Best performance of his career, and Scarlett kills it as well. And this film is just perfect through and through.
I have to say, I'm very excited about Marriage Story. This is Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I adore Scarlett Johansson. I think she's an incredible, incredible actress. And I feel like, seeing her in this movie just seems perfect. Adam Driver, I love beyond comprehension. He's one of the actors where I will literally watch anything he does. Other actors include people like Jake Gyllenhaal, Iko Uwais, Florence Pugh now. Adam Driver is among them, as just I will watch anything he does. Like, I love him obviously as Kylo Ren, of course, but more specifically I love him in BlacKkKlansman. I was really rooting for him to get the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor there, and my favourite role from him so far is in Jim Jarmusch's Patterson. I adore Patterson and I love him in that movie. So
I thought you were gonna say The Dead Don't Die.
Well, I do like him in The Dead Don't Die as well. I actually really like The Dead Don't Die. I know you weren't too hot on it, but I personally love The Dead Don't Die. I thought that movie was really fun. But I think that Adam Driver, just the fact that he's attached his name to this means I will watch it. And also, I think you mentioned The Report as well. I'm very excited to see that. Just again, because it's Adam. So to hear how great he is just further cements to me why I'm going to watch this movie. So yeah. I will continue to fly the flag of the Adam Driver fan club.
Yeah, like you should. Like you said, I didn't really like The Dead Don't Die. I thought it was very sort of good. The humor was like kind of funny at points, but not. But then like Adam Driver, still he's really good in it, and he's the only good thing about the film, in my opinion.
The dry humor just really worked for me.
Dry humor. I love dry humor, like especially like Wes Anderson, but I felt like it just was like way too deadpan, like Bill Murray making the same face the whole time, sort of the same jokes, being like, "Oh, the dead don't die," ha ha ha. It just didn't work for me. Whatever. Let's go back to these other films. Okay, so those ones 5 stars: Jojo, Portrait of Lady on Fire, Marriage Story, and so my number 2 place for the festival is The Lighthouse. Man, The Lighthouse, I watched it twice. Without a doubt, one of the best films like of the decade. It's so fucking good. Like, it is. I love The Witch. It's better than The Witch, and The Witch is so fucking good. This thing is just the perfect combination of everything. It's got 3 characters, right? There's a mermaid, there's the 2 lighthouse keepers, Winslow and Tom. You have them, that's Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, delivering Robert Pattinson's best performance ever. Arguably Willem Dafoe's best performance. I would argue maybe this or At Eternity's Gate. This is one of the best directed films of the year. It's absolutely stunning, and the way he uses the camera is very Hitchcockian, and the way everything is so precise and put together, absolutely perfect. And his presentations is so focused on characters, and the creation of these characters is frames it as if you're stuck in this world. You're stuck with them in the lighthouse, and it's a mythical sort of nightmare that grips you, and be one of the best films of the decade. It's absolutely just like, there is nothing wrong about this film. This film is so fucking good. The sound design is scorching. The visuals, you will not forget some of these visuals. And just a director in complete control of his craft, like say Alfred Hitchcock, or like say more recently, like Tarantino, or like Christopher Nolan in like The Dark Knight or Interstellar, or like Guillermo del Toro in Pan's Labyrinth, or like Ari Aster in like Hereditary or Midsummer. Just complete control. And it's not a horror film. It's very, very I would describe it is it's a mythical film that is about a descent into madness, and it's more psychological. It's extremely psychological, really gets into you. And Defoe and Patterson, they deliver some of the best performances of the year. Like, they are fully enthralled in this. They are lost. You do not for 1 second question this. And also, it's one of the best written screenplays of the year. Like, the language and how everything is put together, like, really reflects how perfectly put together this film is, because and so well researched that when it comes together, it's just absolutely amazing, and it's one of the greatest achievements this year. And it's an unstoppable force of dark and maddening confinement, because it really, really gets under your skin, and you won't stop thinking about it when you see it. The impact of how the film is put together and how it finishes, like, it's very much like The Witch in the way it ends, which I won't spoil, but obsessed with this film. The use of light and dark, where you can't see and where you can see, and the relation to German expressionism, film noir, the way it's filmed with the black and white and the framing, it just shows really great about it. And the thing you'll be thinking about, obviously, is the performances, the direction. But then, if you look at a film like, I don't know if you've seen it, but if you've seen like Vertigo, right? Or if you've seen any Hitchcock film, everything is composed to have meaning, right? So everything in the frame you see, and everything that's placed there, like, say, a Wes Anderson as well, or like an Ari Aster, they are so precise. That is done on purpose. And with that purpose, it seems so well-rounded and put together. And going into this film, like I said, it's about this descent into madness, right? It's very mythical. It has Suspiria vibes. It has The Witch vibes in some of the sort of more horror-like moments. But about this sort of tale of like a mariner, and it's mythological in a way. If you've ever read the book, and I highly recommend you read this book, this poem, before you actually see the film, because I studied this at school, called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And it's very similar in the sort of symbolism of this film, because nature and the supernatural aspect of it, and what's real and what isn't real, that comes into question a lot in this film, because they are going into this descent of madness. The symbolism of a seabird, which you may have seen in the posters.
Yeah, I love that poster.
Yeah, it's so good. And what it actually means, you should read The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It's a short poem, it's a ballad. It's heavily influenced by that. That's written by Coleridge. It's heavily influenced by Shakespeare. And it's just, I'm at loss for words, because it's just so good, so well thought out, and it's one of the best films of the decade, for sure.
Yeah, everything you're saying there, it just gets me more and more excited about The Lighthouse. This film just looks tremendous. I'm so upset that I couldn't come down to London to the screening when you invited me. To be able to see this film early would have been amazing, but it's just, I remember just when I first saw the trailer for this, I was absolutely captured by it. It's such a visually striking film, not only due to the obviously the black and white choice, but also the aspect ratio and the kind of eeriness that's built up in that trailer is insane. It creates such an atmosphere and sets up such a world that I'm just really excited to delve into, especially with Willem Dafoe, that performance, that accent, the dialect, Pattinson as well. It just looks so unique and so unlike anything else I've seen. I've yet to see The Witch. I'm actually going to watch The Witch very, very soon. I will definitely be seeing it before I see The Lighthouse. But I just feel like this film is just going to be something very, very different. And I feel like in 2019, that is something we need. 2019, in my opinion, has been a pretty terrible year for films. And this is something that I really want to see. So I feel like The Lighthouse is going to be fantastic. I'm so excited to see it.
You gotta see it, man. It's so
I
good.
will. I 100% will.
And it really reflects. I say with films like coming out this year, with Joker, with The Irishman, with The Lighthouse, and Midsummer, especially those ones, I feel like they from the past. It feels like they could have been made by Hitchcock. Obviously, Scorsese made The Irishman, but it feels like Joker could be made by someone back then. A lot of the films that are really good tend to, right now, I would say a lot of them are very grounded in ways that old sort of masters of filmmaking like Hitchcock and all the people in the past. They're sort of I feel like that's what my impression is. Obviously, Tarantino, Scorsese, they all worked at similar times that obviously Scorsese did, but that's the impression that I get from like especially like Robert Eggers and like Ari Aster. So very impressed by these. Okay, so the last film and my favorite film of the festival by far, and you can do your Irishman review after. I'll just talk about my thoughts. So this was the last film of the festival. It was the final one. I saw Robert De Niro 3 times this week, and it was the best thing ever because he's my favorite actor, along with Leonardo DiCaprio. But he's not in the film. But Scorsese's best friend, other best friend apart from Robert De Niro. But anyway, so I saw Scorsese twice. I saw Harvey Keitel. I saw Al Pacino. That's just icing on the cake. And then I watched the film. Absolutely ate it up. I was all over this film. And I could have watched this film for 10 hours. I was just wanting more and more and more. I could have watched this for days. It's like, watching Goodfellas. I could watch that for ages. I could watch The Godfather for ages. Although it's not Scorsese, it's sort of similar in, a different way. I could watch The Wolf of Wall Street for days. Scorsese has this weird way of capturing your attention and just keeping you along. I don't care that it's 3.5 hours long. I wanted it to be longer than that. I was so enthralled by this whole story and so engrossed. And let's first off talk about the performances. So it has Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci is back from retirement. You have Harvey Keitel, and you've got loads of amazing supporting performances. You can look online, you will see so many good people, and when you watch the film, you'll be like, holy shit, these guys are so fucking good when they come up. About my favorite performance, Al Pacino. Man, I am considering, I've been thinking about this. His best performance ever, and that's saying a lot because I freaking love him in The Godfather Part 2, Scarface, so many things. But I think this may be his best performance yet, and that's really me because I was expecting him to be really good, like amazing. But yeah, he really blew the doors off for me. Joe Pesci, I love Joe Pesci. He's one of my favorites. He does such a good job. He's very much more so subtle in this film. I think he does a really, really good job. And same with Robert De Niro. Is Robert De Niro sort of that he brings himself, and he's more fragile in this film, and he's more remorseful, and he's a bit more delicate than normal. But man, Robert De Niro kills it as per usual. Why he's my favorite actor ever, along with Leo. But Scorsese, so he's back, and he's returned with one of his best films. Like, I've watched so many freaking Scorsese films. He's my third favorite director after Tarantino and Kubrick. But Scorsese, like Goodfellas, is one of my favorite films ever. The Wolf of Wall Street, Mean Streets, like the list goes on. I freaking love this guy. And so he comes back with one of his best films ever. It's the best film he's done possibly since Goodfellas. Like, I think The Departed is pretty close to this, and The Wolf of Wall Street is pretty close to this. They're some of my favorite films. And so he's back. This is one of his best films ever. Really sweet mix, if I'm referencing other Scorsese films, of Goodfellas for the first part, and then it sort of goes in a more silent way, like the film he made in 2016 with Andrew Garfield. I absolutely loved it. And so it's the violence with this aspects of melancholy and sort of patience. And that is really the way I would describe it is it's very harmonious and it's so beautifully done. I could watch these visuals for days on end. Scorsese directs the frick out of this film. He really kills it. And in the end, I think the sort of slower nature of this film relates to The Godfather. But also, if we're talking Scorsese in terms of silence, and it really could be seen as a study of age. And I think the sort of pace of it really reflects that very well. And so, like Mean Streets and Goodfellas, Scorsese really brings feel of his older films with it, and that comes obviously with the gangster vibe. But what especially reminded me of that, and what especially sort of propelled the narrative for me, was the music, the doo-wop music from the 50s and 60s, utilizing some of the timeless classics from those times. And I'm a massive fan of that, so obviously I'm biased. But anyway, so it's a glorious time, and the music really acts as a narrative figure. It sort of neatly aids along with the film, and you get those songs that pop up, and you just can't help but like tap your fingers or tap your toes along to it. And it really captures that magic. Like hearing, say, in Mean Streets, like Be My Baby at the start, tracking shot with the Shirelles, or in Goodfellas, like you really feel that music within the film, and it's part of the DNA of the film. And I love that. I love that about Scorsese. I love that about Tarantino. The music really is part of his work. He's topped himself once again, and I was just so enthralled by this. And the violence is obviously very Scorsese like. It's very brash, it's very irrational, but it's completely unforgiving and not forgotten. Though it's not like a film like Rambo, recently, where you kill a guy, you're like, hell yeah, he just killed a guy, but then that has no impact on you. You're just like, oh, he just killed a guy. But then every time there is violence in this film, you feel it. It's so close, it's so brash, it's so in the moment. It shows the morality of these characters and how in depth they are, very much so like Goodfellas, and the consequences of being whacked, as they say in the film, if you're a wise guy or if you're not. If you don't follow the rules, you get killed. And it really, like his films, there is always a really strong moral message in the film, and it is just as perfect as it is in Goodfellas, Mean Streets, The Departed, all of that. And so the film, everyone's talking about it because of its runtime. It's 3 hours and like a half. I don't know how long it exactly is. It's never felt for me. I was just there desiring more and more and more. I just wish it just never ended completely, to be honest. Like, I don't think I've felt that with a film, really, apart from, say, Tarantino. Time, or like Django, I just like, yeah, I never want it to end. Same thing with this film. And so it's really a testament to this film just firing perfectly on all cylinders. Scorsese's direction, so on point. And the acting, production design, costumes, the soundtrack. I really have to mention the soundtrack because I don't think as many people are going to mention the soundtrack. And so it's what I would say real movie magic. And so The Irishman is it's neck and neck between Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Irishman for being my favorite of the year. One of the best films of the decade, for sure, for me. And I would say, I know lots of people don't like to say the word masterpiece, but I think this really applies to it. It is from the master of cinema, Scorsese, with some of the best performances of the decade. Al Pacino potentially gives his best performance ever. He kill it. Harvey Keitel kills it in the small amount of time he's in. A perfect film for me. I loved it, and I think it's so, so good.
Big words. So The Irishman was actually the one film from the London Film Festival I was able to see. Luckily, my local kind of independent theatre was broadcasting it from the London Film Festival to where I'm from. So that was really cool, and I actually got the chance to see this in the cinemas rather than Netflix, which I really appreciated, because this was a movie that needs to be experienced on the big screen. As awesome as it is that everyone will be able to watch it on Netflix, nothing beats the cinematic experience of seeing it. For me, The Irishman, I think it's a really great film. I think that, this film really is sold on the idea of the powerhouses of the genre all coming together for this one film. Of course, you have Scorsese directing, you have De Niro, Pesci, Pacino, and Keitel all in this film, and they are all phenomenal. Like I say, Pacino in particular is brilliant here. De Niro is also great. Pesci, again, very understated, but I think a very, very strong performance from him. Keitel, very impressionable from the short amount of time he's in it. The performance that really stood out to me, though, and I think it mainly stood out because I didn't even know he was in the movie, and I love this actor every time he shows up, is Ray Romano. I love Ray Romano, and
which role does he play?
He's the lawyer who
Oh my god, he's so good.
He's brilliant, and I always forget how much I love him until I see him again, because he doesn't do many movies, so when he shows up, it's just amazing, and he's fantastic in this. So all the performances across the board I just thought were absolutely fantastic in this movie. Also, like, a big selling point of this movie was the de-aging. Talking about how they de-aged De Niro and all the other actors in this movie to basically portray their entire life, or at least life from entering the mob to the end, I think was really well done. It looks great. There are a couple of shots where I think it looked a bit iffy, but I think for the most part it's really strong. It's really consistent. It's only really, like, there's one shot in particular right at the beginning of De Niro which it kind of reminded me of Welcome to Marwen a little bit, and it's only because the scene is in bright daylight, and I think that's why. But for the most part, 90% of the time it looks brilliant. And Scorsese,
to be honest.
Yeah, some people might not. It's just, I think maybe I was looking out for it, especially at first. And also, I think there's a slight problem with the de-aging as well. That scene where this is slight spoilers for the film, but the scene where he goes to the farmers, like the grocers, and he beats that guy up. That looked really odd because it was meant to be De Niro like in his 30s.
It was because his hands were a bit like...
Yeah, and it was the physicality of it, because he still had the physicality of, a nearly 80-year-old man. So it was a bit bizarre. But anyway, there's not really any way they could have got around that. But the filmmaking from Scorsese is just top-notch here. I feel like the cinematography, the shot composition, the camera work, it's just all really well handled. And I think for a film like this, which really has such a prestige to it, I think to bring in someone like Scorsese to really handle it in such a way with such care and such talent is something that only Scorsese could do. And I feel like that he really lended his talents well to this film, and without him this movie would be lesser, and his filmmaking really reflects that. Now, while I feel like I'm not quite as in love with the movie as you, again, I think the movie's fantastic. I think it's really good. And while I feel like the filmmaking is really strong, I don't really feel like the film excels in any of its filmmaking either, because it doesn't really do anything new. That's not a bad thing. I just feel like that this film is getting a lot of attention where, people are saying, like, I mean, you said to yourself, you said it's a masterpiece. I don't quite feel the same way. I feel like for a film to kind of be a masterpiece in my personal head is to kind of, it has to be kind of innovative and revolutionary at least in some degree. This film didn't really have that for me personally. I just feel like while everything is extremely well made and extremely well done, it's just not anything particularly original either. And I feel like it does kind of feel very similar to some other Scorsese mobster movies. There's not really much that differentiates this one from others for me personally. Now, the runtime is obviously a huge thing. The runtime didn't bother me. I think 3.5 hours. It did scare me a little bit going in. I think it mainly just scared me because I had to go into work the next morning. But I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. My problem with the runtime isn't actually the length, because the thing is, I was never bored in this movie. This movie is very, very good at keeping your attention and keeping you on the edge of your seat. And it does that throughout the entire runtime. My only sort of gripe with the runtime is I feel like the movie runs out of steam about 2 hours in. I think that following that point, the movie eventually gets to a point where I don't think the story was particularly relevant anymore. It kind of gets to a point where the actors are very old, and obviously, I understand that Scorsese wants to get the most out of this movie and get the most out of having all of these actors in one location and making the best out of their acting talents. But it gets to a point for me where I feel like the film almost is telling an irrelevant story, because from the very beginning of this film, you know where it ends. At least for the most part, you know where it ends. So after all the major stuff goes down, it kind of reaches a point of irrelevancy where you're kind of just turning the wheels until we get to the end point of the movie, which again we already know. So it kind of feels like the movie reaches a point where, yeah, everything's done, it's all wrapped up. We could probably end the movie here, but we're going to extend it for another hour and a half because we have these actors. And it's not to say that nothing relevant happens. There are big moments, but I feel like the film doesn't quite justify itself to extend that long. Because for the first 2 hours, I was honestly completely enthralled with this film. And I was very much into it. But it's just after that 2 hour mark, or 2.5 hour mark, I can't remember exactly where, around that sort of time, the movie started to lose interest for me, and I kind of came away from it with a slight sour taste, because I just felt like I had watched something that just didn't need to be that long. Again, as you said as well, I don't have a problem with long runtimes, but films need to be justified to be that long, and I don't think The Irishman exactly is. I think the film, while it never loses quality throughout its entire 3.5 hours, it's just the story of it I don't feel like was particularly warranted to be that long, as there are just so many points where I felt like it could have been cut out. And again, I feel like obviously there are other moments where it's so well made, it's so well acted, it's not boring to watch whatsoever. It's just in the grander context of the film and the story of it, I don't know if it was necessarily required. That's just me personally. I know some people will feel differently, but for me personally, I just felt like there were some things within it, in that back half, in that third act, that just weren't really necessary. And I felt like Scorsese was kind of extending it for the sake of it. And I felt like he didn't need to do that, because he had already crafted such a fantastic film in those first sort of 2.5 hours. To extend it just another hour, just to kind of do it with the actors, I don't know. I just don't think he needed to do that when he had already crafted such a beautiful film already. So for me, I think The Irishman, I think it's a fantastic film. It's so good. It's so well made. It's so well shot. It's so well acted. The de-aging is great to see. I just don't think the film is particularly innovative or excels in any particular way, which doesn't really make it stand out to me. I think it's very good, it's very well made, it just doesn't particularly stand out beyond that. So for me, The Irishman, I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic to see it on the big screen. I didn't think I was going to ever get the chance to do that, especially around the area that I live in. So to get that was fantastic, and it was definitely bolstered by the cinematic experience. Without that, I think this movie would have, because there's just no comparison to watching it on Netflix at home than watching it in the cinema. So to have that was great. And again, I really enjoyed the film all the way through. I think it's so well made, and I think it has so much going for it. I just don't really feel like it particularly stood out as much as it could have. That's me personally.
Yeah, that's interesting. And about Netflix, watching at home. I ain't watching at home until it's out of the cinema. I'm going to see it as many times as I can in the cinema, because this is a film that needs to be seen in the cinema. And I appreciate Netflix for putting out films like this, putting out films like Roma, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, potentially that could have been not funded by, big studios. And I really appreciate it that they put in the effort to try and release them in as many cinemas as they can, whilst also obviously considering the main grossing, which is from online. So I appreciate that. But talking about the runtime, really love the runtime and how it sort of, I feel like for me it warrants how long it is, especially with the last shot. The last sort of hour is more about reminiscing, right? And thinking about, the things he's done in the past, him painting houses. I love that line. Like, didn't paint houses. It's more about like the remorse and looking back at that time. And I think with them getting older, things have to be a bit slower and things have to sort of. I feel like it warrants being by the end, especially with the remorseful aspect of it. So that's just me, but obviously everyone thinks differently of a film. Where would you say it is on your yearly list so far? Like,
I think it's so I'm just pulling up my list right now, just so I can kind of put it into reference.
do top five. Let's just quickly do a top five so far.
So my top 5 of the year currently is number 5, 8th Grade, number 4, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, number 3, Avengers Endgame, number 2, Booksmart, number 1, Midsummer.
Okay, and where's The Irishman, roughly?
The Irishman probably might just crack the top 10 at the moment.
Okay, and how many films have you seen this year? Do you know?
I don't know how many are on this list. No, I'd say it's
Quite a
probably
lot,
around the 40s.
Okay. Yeah, so to put it in comparison, I've seen 2 films this year.
How many, sorry?
95.
Jesus.
Right? Top 5 it's all pretty really close. Like number 5 is pretty much like if I were to pick in an ideal world, I would join like Jojo with Portrait, with Marriage Story, with Midsummer, and this German film called Never Look Away, right? So those are like number 5 roughly. But then number 4 would be, and number 3 would be Joker. Either one of those, I think they could switch around. Depends on my feeling on the day. But number 2, like out of 95 films, number 2 is The Irishman, and it could potentially topple Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood 6 times. I'm obsessed with it. But I'm also obsessed with The Irishman. So if I see it that many times, I think it could potentially beat out Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which can love both of these films. So it's really close. But yeah, so that's a comparison out of the nearly 100 new films I've seen this year.
I mean, I think The Irishman would just crack my top 10. I think, I think that I said this earlier. I think 2019 has been honestly a pretty terrible year for film. The movies that are kind of in the bottom half of my top 10 aren't particularly films that I would class as amazing. The Irishman, there's not really much competition. But I feel like, my number 1, which is Midsummer, that movie was freaking amazing. I don't really know if anything will top that. The only movie that possibly could, from like a pure like fanboy perspective, is Star Wars. Just because I'm not saying Star Wars Rise of Skywalker would be better than Midsummer. It's just as a Star Wars fan, it may top it, but I feel like Midsummer is just like a phenomenal piece of film, and in comparison to The Irishman, I feel like that Midsummer was just so striking and just ugh. Anyway, is there anything else you'd like to add about the London Film Festival while you were there?
No, just go try and go to festivals. They're the best time. You'll probably not sleep, and if you're like me, you'll throw up and you get ill. But watch as many films as you can, and especially London Film Festival. It's great because quite a lot of the big ones, they've been seen maybe, like The Irishman, it was seen at the New York Film Festival like a week before. Marriage Story, they've been seen at a few festivals, like one festival before, and you're like the second opinion on it. You get to validate what they say, and that's always a cool thing.
Yeah, especially I definitely need to make my way to the London Film Festival next year, because there are just so many films that don't get released around here because I don't live in a particular big city, so I don't really get. There are some films I just don't get. Like, for example, like there's on Friday, or well, tomorrow, there is the Peanut Butter Falcon that is not getting released anywhere around here, and that upsets me deeply. So yeah, I will definitely try and make my way there next year. I did try to get in this year, but they didn't accept me as press, so we'll hopefully by next year I would have grown a bit more and we can try that again. But anyway, thank you guys for joining us for this London Film Festival special. This episode is currently nearly an hour and 40 minutes. So yeah, obviously, if you were at the London Film Festival, make sure you let us know. And what films did you see? What did you enjoy? Tell us in the comment section down below. Also, your thoughts on the news we discussed this week. And if you want to see more episodes like this, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any episodes from us. You're definitely going to want to do that because it's a rare occasion. So when we do get one, you will actually be nicely surprised. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I've been Deck.
I've been Ben.
And we hope to see you guys again next time.